You are tapping into one of the most massive and complex machines humanity has ever built, the U.S. electricity grid. It's this invisible giant that powers, well, pretty much everything in our modern lives. But have you ever really, truly stopped to think about it? When you demand that power, what's actually happening behind that wall outlet? Where does all that juice really come from? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We are going to follow that current backwards, from the switch on your wall all the way to the source to the massive power plants generating it. We're going to uncover how we got here, and more importantly, where we're going next. To really get a handle on the grid, you first have to understand our just massive, and I mean massive, and constantly growing demand for electricity. Our appetite for power is, well, it's pretty much insatiable. So just how insatiable are we talking? Get this number in your head, 4 trillion. 4 trillion kilowatt hours, that's what the US burns through every single year. Now, to put that into perspective, 1 single kilowatt hour is enough to run your fridge for a day. Now multiply that by 4 trillion. It's a mind-boggling number, and it's the baseline for this whole conversation. So how in the world did we get here? Well, this timeline tells the story. Back in the 1950s, electricity became a standard thing in every home. Then the 70s hit, and boom, air conditioning everywhere, creating these huge demand spikes in the summer. Then, of course, the 90s brought us the digital revolution, with computers and servers needing constant power. And today, it's all about electric cars and the massive data centers that run our online world. Every step of the way just poured more fuel on the fire. And the growth, it's just been explosive. This chart says it all. We went from less than 1 trillion kilowatt hours back in 1960 to 4 trillion today. That is more than a 5-fold increase in just a handful of decades. Just wild. Okay, so it's crystal clear we use a ton of electricity. The next big question is, where's it all coming from? Let's break down what our power mix looks like right now. This chart gives us a fantastic snapshot. Right now, natural gas is the undisputed king of the hill, giving us 43% of our power. Now, here's what might surprise you. Renewables, things like wind and solar, have actually leapfrogged both nuclear and coal. They're sitting at a solid 21%. And coal, which used to be the dominant source, it's now down at just 17%. So let's zoom in on those top 3. Natural gas is great because it's abundant and can be fired up quickly when we need more power, but it's still a fossil fuel. Renewables are fantastic, they're clean, they're getting cheaper, but they're intermittent. The sun isn't always shining, the wind isn't always blowing, and then there's nuclear, which gives us reliable, totally carbon-free power, but it's got some serious headwinds with public perception and, of course, what to do with the waste. Of course, none of this power is free. It all comes with a price tag. So how do our electricity bills actually compare to what people are paying in other developed countries? This table really puts it into perspective. If you live in a place like Germany, you're paying almost double what we do for power. Here in the US, at 17 cents per kilowatt hour, we're kind of in the middle of the pack. Cheaper than Japan, but definitely more expensive than our neighbors to the north in Canada. That price reflects everything from our energy mix to the cost of our infrastructure. Okay, let's pivot and look ahead a little. Because as much as our demand has grown in the past, believe it or not, the next few decades are set up for another absolutely massive surge. And the main driver behind this surge is one huge idea: electrification. We're talking about shifting huge parts of our economy that used to run on fossil fuels over to the electric grid. Think millions and millions of electric cars hitting the road, all plugging in at roughly the same time when people get home from work. And we're talking about homes switching from natural gas furnaces to electric heat pumps. It's a fundamental shift. And the impact of this is just staggering. Projections are showing that by 2050, our electricity demand could leap from 4 trillion kilowatt hours to 6 trillion. That's a 50% increase. To put that in perspective, we basically have to add an amount of power generation equal to everything we used in the 1980s, on top of what we already have. And we have to do it in less than 30 years. Wow. So this brings us to the final, and let's be honest, the most critical question of all. How are we going to build a grid that can handle all this? What are the huge challenges we absolutely have to overcome? See, to power the future, we're going to need a totally different kind of grid. Our system today is mostly based on a 20th century model. Big, centralized power plants sending power one way over aging wires. And that makes it really vulnerable.
The grid of tomorrow has to be resilient, it has to be flexible enough to handle the natural ups and downs of renewables, and smart enough to manage power coming from millions of different places, like rooftop solar panels.
The good news is there's a clear path forward. First, we've got to modernize our transmission lines and make the grid smarter. Second, we have to keep diversifying where our energy comes from, pushing renewables and investing in new tech like next-generation nuclear. Third, and this one is absolutely key, we need massive, and I mean massive, investment in energy storage like big batteries, so we have power even when the sun's not shining. And finally, we can't forget that the cheapest and cleanest power is the power we never use in the first place. So we've got to get serious about energy efficiency. So at the end of the day, it all comes down to this. The demand for electricity isn't going anywhere. In fact, it's accelerating. Every part of our future, from our cars to our entire economy, is going to depend on having abundant, reliable, and clean electricity. The choices we're making right now about how to build that future grid, well, they're going to define the world for generations to come.